Carlson. Vieira. Maniscalco. Here. Hurtak. Goods. Miranda. And Citro.
I am here as well. We have left off, and now we are hearing agenda items number 8, 9, and 10 together. However, an important person who I was hoping was going to be here is not. Do we have Tampa Fire Rescue online?
If you wouldn't mind deferring those items, I think Chief Tripp had a conflict at lunch, and so she may not be back
Okay,
yet.
then let's go with agenda item number 11 to be heard. With agenda item number 12, we will be hearing them together, but voting on them separately.
Good afternoon, City Council. Mike Schmidt, Assistant City Attorney. We're here on items number 11 and 12, and if we could get we submitted a PowerPoint, if we could get a PowerPoint up.
Then that's that. I know we have so many other people that, yes, yeah, Mary. Yes. Yes, please proceed.
Okay. There was a PowerPoint submitted with this. I'm not sure. There we go.
IT, there
All
you
right,
go.
perfect.
Can we have it up on our screens on the dais, please?
All right. We're here because back several months ago, I brought forward a agenda item to amend 23.5. That is dealing with civil citations, and we wanted to designate skateboarding as a lesser offense, making it a $75 lowest category punishment offense, so that if there were ever any violations of skateboarding, that it would be as a civil citation. When I brought this to City Council asked it that, had a motion that we come back to also look at 25172. It had not been revised since 1995, and so City Council asked that we come back, look at it. We've met with Mobility. Brandon Campbell with Mobility is here today also. So we've been working with Mobility for the last couple of months to review what other cities are doing and what we could do to update our ordinance. So based on that, I will try to go through this really fast. So recommendations are going to be that we designate penalty as a civil citation. We add a definition for skateboarding, and transportation purposes. We remove the prohibition from downtown and Ybor except for 7th Avenue. We consider removal of roller skates and inline skates, and we remove any authorization preempted by state laws. As I said, this was originally a motion that I brought forward. And presently 25172, skateboard, coasters, and other similar devices are prohibited to operate or ride on any street, roadway, sidewalk in downtown, any sidewalk in Ybor, and public ramps and private property unless permission is granted. Oops. And then there's presently also, it states for roller skates and inline skates, those are prohibited to operate or ride on, likewise streets, roadways, sidewalks, and then areas between 6th, 7th, and 8th, private property and public property where it's posted. So 23.5, as I was mentioning, establishes fine amounts from classes 1 to 4. We were asking this to be a class 1, the lowest amount for $75. Presently, if I hadn't already said so, or I certainly have said so in the past, it's presently punishable as a notice to appear to county court, and that's what we are now trying to make it go. Instead of going to county criminal court, this would just be a civil citation. So we're reducing it pretty dramatically. So here's 23.5, Schedule 1. As you see, the underlined section in the right column, 25172 was added. Chapter 316 is our uniform traffic laws. The city may not enact any ordinance on a matter covered by 316, expressly covered, unless it's authorized. 316-0085 covers governmental liability. Specifically, to understand, skate parks were added here to encourage cities to allow skaters, inline skaters, even bikes to have a place to go, because oftentimes a lot of cities prohibit them from sidewalks and things like that, because sidewalks are meant for pedestrians, and a lot of cities have determined not to allow skateboards on sidewalks. The legislature made it so that to encourage a place for skaters to be, for cities to have a place for skaters designated, and the city would not be liable for injuries that happen at skate parks, basically. So the city currently has 3 such parks. There's also private skateboard parks for people to go who want to skate. We looked at other cities. We've looked at Orlando, Miami, every surrounding city. I mean, we looked at least 10 cities. In the end, we found Orlando had a definition of skateboarding, and transportation purposes. We heard city council to say that they wanted us to consider whether or not, by us staff, to consider whether or not skateboards could be used on sidewalk for transportation purposes, so that they could be allowed even downtown to go to work. So Orlando recently had amended theirs. We, after looking at all the cities we looked at, it looked like Orlando covered what city council was asking us to consider. So the definitions that we're recommending is skateboard, and it's defined there, skateboarding, and then, as I said, transportation purposes. So it would allow transportation purposes, basically would allow somebody to take their skateboard now downtown, whereas currently it's prohibited. You would allow it to be on the sidewalks for transportation purposes. So if you're going to work, you could skateboard. If you're going just from point A to point B, you could skateboard downtown on the sidewalk. But it could only be done if you're doing it for transportation purposes. So if somebody is deciding to do tricks on public property, doing the grinding on public property or whatever that is, that would not be allowed. That wouldn't fall within the definition of a transportation purpose. All right, so the recommended language, skateboarding would be prohibited on all public property owned or controlled by the city, and on all public property owned and controlled by other governmental entities, except for transportation purposes. If the person is skateboarding yields a right of way to pedestrians, gives an audible signal before overtaking and passing a pedestrian, or as may be specifically authorized by appropriate governmental entity. Notwithstanding the above, skateboarding would be prohibited still on just 7th Avenue and on private property in the city, and also property controlled by the city as specified there. All right, and it would require a helmet for those under 16. That's consistent with state law under Chapter 316. Bikes are currently, that language actually came straight out of Chapter 316, talking about when bikes are required to have helmets. And again, it would make it a Class 1 violation. So this is what we're asking City Council to consider. It's the need to allow different forms of transportation to safely use sidewalks, to modernize the ordinance. Parts of the current ordinance state that you can skate on the streets between certain hours. We would need to remove that. There's a preemption in state statute that skates cannot be on streets, so that has to be removed anyways. We need to promote transportation and not damage property. Present facilities allow public and private locations for skating, and we still want to prohibit on 7th Avenue because there is still a high pedestrian area there, and there's still very many avenues to get around Ybor without being on 7th. So that is what we would like City Council to consider. We are prepared to bring back for first read the ordinance if City Council agrees with those recommendations, and we would bring back an ordinance changing it from the Class 1 that we previously proposed, and also all these changes to 25172. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I want to say I appreciate you really focusing on letting skateboarding be a method of transportation, and that we're taking rollerblading and roller skates out, which is really funny. I can only imagine what it was like when we actually had to have that ordinance. But people still use those for transit as well. My only concern is the $75 fine. I still think that's difficult for kids. So that's an area that I would like to hear from other council members on, but I appreciate you working diligently to make skateboarding more of a transportation issue while keeping it away from places that legally it's not supposed to be.
Councilman Carlson.
Yes, thanks for reviewing this. As I said when we first brought this up, I don't think we should have fines for skateboarding. I was not a big skateboarder. I think Chair Citro was, and so he can probably weigh in better than any of us. But I had lots of friends who are skateboarders, and I think it can hurt our city's reputation for handing out lots of tickets to skateboarders. It seems to me that instead of looking at whether they're using it for transportation or not, which would be hard for a kid to understand. I'm trying to think of my 13-year-old or 12-year-old trying to figure out what's transportation versus something else. It seems like if there was some kind of fine, that it would be around destruction of property or intimidation of other people. Like if you're riding fast and you run into somebody who's disabled or something like that, that would be more what the fine would be, instead of just if someone is riding along and then they spin around in the other direction, does that mean that they're not using it as a transportation method anymore, or did they change direction? When you looked at other cities, did other cities just look at it from kind of the damage or intimidation standpoint instead of how they're riding it?
So it's already required that they follow the rules of pedestrians when they're on the sidewalks. So as long as they're on the sidewalks, they shouldn't be knocking people down or anything like that.
And what about like if they're riding on, there are those guards on the side of benches and things so they can't.
Right.
Right. And is there a specific fine for that that's separate than this?
So that's why we were defining what transportation would be, because as long as you're operating for the purpose of transportation and then it defines what, leaving and the ground to do tricks and things like that.
I guess my question is, what's the downside of taking this out altogether, not having any fines? It seems like if the pedestrian thing is covered in that they can't intimidate pedestrians, if there's some way that we can just prohibit destruction of property, then why can't they spin around and do whatever they want to do on the sidewalk or in Curtis Dixon Park or whatever?
Certainly, we're here to consider anything, but we found it to be a lot more difficult to sit there and describe a laundry list of things you can't do rather than just define what you can do, which is for transportation purposes. And it was difficult to come up with a laundry list of all the things that somebody can't do. That is more, we have looked at other cities. A lot of other cities just flat out don't allow skateboarding in certain areas, downtowns, areas where there's pedestrians, for the concerns of knocking somebody over and things like that.
And I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but I'm particularly sensitive to this issue because the whole fight over the Bro Bowl, and that caused tremendous angst in our community and got us a lot of bad publicity. So I want to make sure that we don't do anything to do that again. But I would rather reduce and take away the fines, except in the case of property damage or intimidation or hurting someone, but I'll yield to the skateboarder.
Councilman Goose.
I have to disagree with a little bit of this. You have to have consequences for your actions, be it kids or not. Skateboarding on sidewalks. When you have people that are traveling, walking, pedestrians, some people are not courteous. Some people are just not courteous. Most of your average skateboarders are between teenage kids, probably between 15 and about, I would say maybe 18. And if they're an avid skateboarder, probably between the ages of maybe 17 and 24. Those are your real skateboarders. You don't have small little kids skateboarding. Been around the cop too long to know skateboarding. But you're talking about two things, Mr. Carlson. When it's destruction of property, that's criminal mischief. That's a different element versus someone just, it's an intentional act. It's no different if you have a parking violation. You park your car, and you have to park your car. Parking violation is probably about $20, $20, $25. You know, I can go with reducing the skateboarding fine down, but not to have any fine, no. Because, or to where you have a first occurrence, the police officer can put the person's name in the database. If they've been warned once or warned twice, maybe the third time, now you get a citation for 10, 15 bucks. But you gotta have consequence for your actions for repeat violators. I'm still hesitant about having skateboards. To me, I don't view skateboarding as a means of transportation. I mean, some do. I respect everybody's opinion, but I don't. I mean, to me, skateboarding is a fun activity. You can get around, but most kids I see, most bigger teenage kids that are, you know, just got with their friends going around. It could be a way of getting around, but when you define transportation, I don't really see it that way. What I see is a lot of kids at times when I was out there, you know, sometimes they're just being a jerk. Just riding skateboards on the sidewalks, and they don't care if they hit anybody, and then it's like, you know, things happen. But I don't believe you put anybody in jail. I don't believe them going to court for a first appearance or notice to appear and all that kind of stuff. I don't believe in that. But I do believe that it should be maybe a small $10 to $15 thing. But again, looking at occurrences, first, second time, then maybe the last time you finally hit them with something. But not to give anything, I couldn't go along with not giving anything.
Councilman Miranda.
I just want to ask a question for the counselor. And I realize and I know that the river walk is an animal there. A lot of people use it for many things. What about skateboarding there? Is that allowed or not?
Well,
You want to answer that one? I think as proposed, it would be allowed for the same purposes, for transportation purposes, but not for.
it is a city.
Well, they must all be late for work because they fly by with it.
It is.
I can tell you that. And what happened is somebody, not today, hope never, but somebody's going to hit somebody in the back. They're going to fall. And that river walk is not made out of clay or rubber, made out of a hard material. And when your head hits there, you don't have a helmet like the Buccaneers do. You may
Understood.
have a permanent concussion.
I would add that when the Riverwalk
Can you
was.
state your name for us, please?
Oh, yes, Brandon Campbell, Smart Mobility Manager. I would add that when the Riverwalk was funded, part of that grant application funding, I know it's been discussed, but as a multi-use path, other devices beyond just walking would be allowed on the river.
I'm not disputing all that at all. I'm just saying at the end of the day, when somebody does that, somebody's going to be responsible for that person getting hurt, and it's not going to be me. That's all.
Anyone else? Councilman Maniscalco.
To maybe come to an agreement on this, what if we structured it, first time a warning, second time $10, third time $25, and max it at $25? No? No?
I don't know the issue with that.
I mean, it's not zero and it's not a crazy amount.
Anyone else? Not to get off subject, I have the opinion that all non-ADA compliant motorized vehicles should not be on sidewalks. Anything that has a motor should not be on sidewalks. We have electric bikes now that are capable of doing 30 miles an hour, ladies and gentlemen. They're on sidewalks. We have scooters on sidewalks. We have those one-wheeled contraptions that are on sidewalks. Tampa does not have the infrastructure to get those non-ADA motorized vehicles off the sidewalks and onto a different designated path. Having said that, as a former thrasher, and I still would be if I didn't do a scorpion that almost broke my back. Scorpion is where you bend over backwards and your feet touch the back of your head. Skateboarding is not illegal. Acts of vandalism are. Acts of property damage are. Acts of personal injury, injury to another are. I see many people that are using skateboards to get to and from work. I see a lot of people doing pipes on the sides of building out here. There's a big difference. I I personally cannot support any type of fine to a skateboarder who is using a skateboard as a transportation. Somebody that does pipes on the side of a building and they're damaging a building or they run into a car, sure, fine them for that. But skateboarding shouldn't be illegal. What is the pleasure of council?
I believe, my feeling is, I believe you gotta have something to enhance the ability of them thinking not to do it again. And if you're gonna have just a continuous, don't do it again, Harry or Charlie or Mary or Apple, whatever, that ain't gonna resonate. Maybe the first time, no, but we gotta have something in the second and third time, and it can't be constant. A $25 fine is like $1.50 when I was a kid. That's what it amounts to.
Councilwoman, I'm sorry, Councilman Miranda, are you finished?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Hurtak.
Thank you. That's where I think criminal mischief comes into play. So I'm not going to support any type of fines. I said that before. I'll just say it again. I really do appreciate the defining of skateboarding and allowing it on sidewalks. I think it's appropriate. And I see a lot of skateboarders on the bus. When so people use it for that last mile transit. So I do see it used. I probably see at least one skateboarder on the bus when I'm on there. So I really cannot support any type of fine.
Did you want to make a statement before I go to Councilman Carlson?
Maybe one thing would be interesting of council to know, I pulled the stats for our motor scooters. Those got passed a couple years ago, as you know, to be allowed to be used on the sidewalks. They are currently a civil citation punishable by a $75 fine. I pulled the stats. There has been one citation issued in the couple of years that has been allowed. So officers, and then I pulled skateboarding stats. In 10 years of skateboarding, the last 10 years, 8 offense reports were opened, of which very few actually resulted in anything. So predominantly what you see is officers are always using their discretion and providing warnings. Officers are not out there looking to write citations for skateboarding, for motor scooters. They are issuing warnings.
Councilman Hurtak, then I'm going to go to Councilman Carlson.
Thank you. But generally, scooter riders legally have to be 18. They're required to be 18 to ride one of those motorized scooters, if I'm remembering things correctly. And again, I really feel like criminal mischief, if there's something going on, the officer can still give a warning under criminal mischief and can still then give a fine based on criminal mischief. I think we're just adding something to where it doesn't need to be added.
Councilman Carlson.
3 things real fast. Number one, you talk about how these haven't been used very much, but it seems like these kinds of policies are not abused by the officer's discretion, but if somebody above them sets a policy, like with biking while black, it was a policy from above that based on the news coverage, incentivized officers, compensated them for writing more tickets. And so if we got a mayor in the future who didn't like skateboarding and wanted skateboarders off the street, it seems like they could abuse it by giving instructions of police to get incentives to write tickets. And so that's why I would like to protect the public by not having that on. I think, to be fair, your original idea in coming to us was to reduce the fine. And so unless I'm wrong, to have no fine, we would have to undo the existing ordinance.
As the ordinance currently stands, it's punishable by a notice to appear at a county criminal court.
It's a what? Sorry, I can't hear you.
It's a notice to appear at a county criminal court. And that's the way it currently is. So the original idea was to reduce it down to the lowest categorized fine.
Yeah, because you saw the same problem we saw, but your solution was to reduce the fine. You were trying to, I think, be kind, and then it sounded like we're being critical of what you proposed, but some of us don't believe in having anything.
No, we want to bring back to you what you guys ultimately want.
I think I would rather rescind it, but I would yield the rest of my time. Usually the chair goes last, but in this case, the chair is a content expert, and I really would like to know what he would propose.
I was. Councilman Goode.
Yeah, I listened to my councilwoman. And you're right, you see some people do get on the bus and that last leg, they use a skateboard to get to work, and that's legitimate. I agree. I hate that they're skating on sidewalks because there are people there and sometimes people are not courteous. That's the problem I have. But I can live with it. Mr. Carlson does have one point. If you have an issue in a certain area where people are not being courteous, you could have a supervisor or somebody, a citizen make complaints to say someone got hurt and it comes down where you need to go out there and have somebody monitor the area. And then, yeah, you could have somebody, a supervisor or officers go out there and write some citations. You're right on that, Mr. Carlson. But me being the old cop, that ain't something that most police officers go be doing. I wouldn't be doing it, and the supervisor have to write me up because I ain't going out just giving kids no tickets. I'm just going to tell you quit doing it, or I'm going to take the board, take it to your mama's house. No, that's me. That's the right way to do it. But you can't say not have any consequence because you're going to have those knuckleheads, hate to say it, they're going to just continue to do what they want to do no matter what you tell them. And sometimes you got to, take a little bit of that candy money away. I don't agree with $75. Like I said, maybe $15 or something like that would be adequate. That's not a big astronomical ask of money. But again, you're not talking about little kids out there riding all sidewalks. You're talking about your bigger teenager kids. I can look at about 10 or 15 bucks just as a wake-up call, but your first a warning, because really it's going to be your repetitive person that's going to keep doing it. It's not going to be this person, that person. It's going to be somebody who's a recidivism person. So I just think that, looking at a first-time occurrence, maybe even a second-time warning, and then at the end give them maybe $10 or $15. But I just can't support not doing anything.
Are you finished, Councilman? Councilman Goods?
I'm finished.
Thank you. Councilman Miranda?
Thank you. I feel like Councilman Goods, and what we're talking about is the skateboarders, but we're forgetting that the skateboarder is not the only one on the sidewalk. For every skateboarder, there's at least 500 people walking on that same sidewalk, on and off. So if the sidewalks are not one way that way and one way this way, you walk any way you want on the sidewalk. So you got people walking east and west, one going east, one coming west. You got a skateboarder coming on both sides. And nothing's going to happen, I'm sure. I'll rest my case.
Councilwoman Hurtak, and let's have last round of questions or last round of statements.
I just want to speak as a bicyclist on the Riverwalk. I use it constantly. I'm there at least once a week. Most cyclists I see are pretty good. Either we have a bell. In fact, I just bought myself a new bell for my new bike that didn't have one. So you can ring it, and then you let people in front of you know. They move over. And your motion specifically said, encouraging skateboarders to say something. But ultimately, oftentimes, I hate to say it, it's the pedestrians who are the worst because they walk like 5 across on a sidewalk. I'm being honest, on the Riverwalk. And then you say, excuse me, on your left, excuse me, and you have to wait, and you just slow down. So that's what a skateboarder would do. They're not going to mow people over. Kids are going to be kids, but kids still don't want to mow people over. We aren't seeing skateboarding the way it was when we were younger. I just don't see this as an issue. And I just wanted to mention that as someone who regularly utilizes the Riverwalk, the cyclists, and I've seen skateboarders on there, are good about just waiting until someone passes and then they can safely pass. It's just about being a good citizen, and as far as I can tell, we haven't been able to regulate good citizenship. If we had, I think we would have at this point. So that's all I wanted to say.
Anyone else? What is the pleasure of council?
Can we get your opinion? Can we get your
I
content
already told
expert?
you, my opinion is skateboarding is not illegal. It's not illegal.
But would you make a motion to rescind the fine altogether, or what would you do?
I've already said that
Yeah.
my opinion is that skateboarding is not illegal.
Okay.
Then I'll make a motion that we come back with an ordinance that says, that just takes it off. But I do think that we need to have the definition of it being allowed to be,
Speak your piece there, sir.
Sorry, but as a legal advisor, I have to explain why I believe there is a need for a skateboarding ordinance. I've reviewed a lot of case law, so the reason the legislature created the exemption for the skate parks and things like that is to encourage skating at these skate parks, not on the sidewalks. And if we don't have anything on the books, and a skateboarder sues the city, right, and does tricks and does whatever, and we say, oh, we don't have anything on the books prohibiting skateboarding, we are setting ourselves up for lawsuits. I'm just bringing that out there. There needs to be some regulation of skateboarding if we're gonna allow it on.
In that thought pattern, the state came out with this when?
Skateboarding?
Yes.
I couldn't tell you. I mean, skateboarding has been prohibited.
5 years ago, 10 years ago? 20 years ago?
For 20 years ago, maybe?
20 years ago, things have changed. We are such an urban environment right now that somebody that needs to get 5 blocks away to where their job may be, a skateboard is going to be the quickest, easiest way to go. With the price of gas, some people are relying now on skateboards. Times are different. I'm sorry,
Yes, sir.
Councilman Goods. Councilman Maniscalco. I'm fired up.
Let's just, I'd like to make a motion that we just reduce it then to a warning. Not take it off the books, but from a notice to appear, just take it down to a warning. Yeah, at least something. The police officer has the discretion to say, you know, I'm gonna take you home, I'm gonna take your board, I'm gonna, you know, don't do it again, but, you know, if there's property damage, then that's a separate thing. I mean, could an officer then charge somebody there, you know? So, I mean, that's covered, but again, we have an ordinance in place, and that's it. But we have something. So in the case that we are sued, we have some kind of protection. So again, the motion would be to reduce it from a notice to appear to just a warning. No fines, just a warning.
Councilman Hurtag.
Do we have these laws on the books for scooters? Do we have them for bicyclists? I mean,
Yes.
not that,
Yeah.
to be,
Sure.
because it sounds like we're just singling out skaters here.
There's,
And if we don't have, and if we do have laws for scooters and bicyclists, if we could just lump skateboarders and roller bladers and roller skaters and one-wheelers and all of it together?
so the chapter 316, as I gave a brief overview, already discusses bikes, e-bikes, motorized scooters. What we are talking about is, though, there's a specific section in 316 that says skates, roller skates are not allowed on the streets, but the cities can choose to allow them on sidewalks. So there are certain things that the cities traditionally decide whether or not to allow on sidewalks, which are, you know, are pedestrian use primarily, but should the city allow other things? So that's why cities have regulated skates on sidewalks, because they absolutely cannot be on the streets. Bikes can be on the streets, bikes can be a bike pass, skates cannot.
That was not my question, though, and I apologize if I was not clear. My question was, do we have laws on the books that fine scooter riders and bike riders?
Yeah, under chapter 316, there are already prohibitions that result in a civil citation, plus we have our motorized scooter ordinance
For
for
what?
sidewalks. For bikes,
Yeah, like for what are those citations?
the amount of the fine is probably, I believe it's gonna be $30.
So can we just put skateboards in with that?
Well, that's under state law. It's under chapter 316. So
Can we choose to just follow
we could
the
make
same law
we could make
that
it
we use for
$30.
scooters and bicycles and one wheels and I mean, doesn't that seem fair? But, I mean, I'm not thrilled with it, but if we're already allowing $30 fines for bikes and scooters and, I mean, I still really, I don't care for the fines involved with skateboarding, but
My motion still stands.
We have a motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Vieira.
Yes, my motion would be to, not eliminate this ordinance, but to reduce it from a notice to appear to just a warning. And that's it.
And Councilman Vieira, you're still seconding?
Oh, yes, sir.
Councilman Carlson.
So if we do this, what happens the second and third time? Do they still get
Nothing.
fined?
Nothing.
Is it still just a warning?
No, don't do it again.
That's up to city council.
No, just changing the first one would also change whatever happened.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
You know, I'm gonna support this because truly, if you're grinding on city property or private property, you can still get a criminal mischief fine for that. So I think that's a grand solution and I support it. Thank you.
Councilman Goods.
I can't support that. I mean, not having any consequences, I can't support that. If you said a warning and then a subsequence after that, maybe $10, $12, something like that, but I can't support no fine at all. And even if you put it in the bicycle chapter, you already said it's $30. So if you put it there, they're gonna pay $30. But I'm saying maybe $10 or $12. But you just can't say, I'm gonna stop you one day and the same guy is doing it every day, and we don't, it doesn't make any sense.
Let's
I know
go
we try to
to
be nice.
a vote, please.
Okay, go to vote, Mr.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Let's do a roll call vote.
Hurtak,
Yes.
Carlson. Yes. Goods,
No.
Viera,
Yes.
Maniscalco,
Yes.
and Citro.
Yes.
Motion carried with Miranda and Goods voting no.
Thank you, that clears, I'm sorry.
Just point of clarification there. So the current ordinance, reduce it, what we currently already have, just reduce it down to a warning, is what you're asking.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
But we are also then making it legal to skate on the sidewalk, correct?
Well, if you're getting a warning for skating on the
Oh,
sidewalk.
okay, then
We did
yeah.
not.
Then
Then it
it's
doesn't
not
matter.
legal.
Okay.
Kind of like weed. Okay, let's go. Now, Chief Tripp, you're here? Yes, I see you back there. Let's go to number 8, 9, and 10. Again, to be heard together, but voted on if necessary separately.
May I say something about number 10? Because I think this will save time.
Surely, Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much. Hi, Chief. Thank you very much, ma'am. For number 10, what I was actually requesting, and I spoke to Chief Bennett about this yesterday, was a panel of citizens picked by council, mayor, et cetera, to see on how we can improve our policies holistically on mental health in a wide array of areas. So I wouldn't want you to go, the memo was wonderful, and I really appreciate it, but I think that by going through it, it's not directly on what I was looking for, I guess. And again, wonderful information, but in other words, I wouldn't want you to go on to something if I'm going to make a motion that kind of takes it in another direction. You see what I'm saying? So in other words, if it pleases the chair, I mean, I would, unless if Chief Tripp wants to talk about that, obviously within your discretion, but that's it.
So,
Question.
Councilman Goods.
I read the memo. I have some concerns about having an outside panel when you're talking about policy that relates to police and fire, with mental health. I think you're gonna run into some union issues.
Can we hear our staff report and we'll go in from there?
Well, I was just countering what he was saying, but we can hear the staff report, but that's why I asked to be recognized, so I can let him know where me some issues at. But go, by all means,
And
Mr.
after we
Chairman.
hear the staff reports, we can go into questions and answers and comments and issues and everything. Chief Tripp.
Good afternoon, Council. Barbara Tripp, Temple Fire Rescue. My apologies for the delay. I was at another meeting. So do we want to talk about 10 first? And it's going to be quick because basically with that, if you're looking for a panel to talk about fire and police mental health, I think that should be something internal as opposed to external, because we're kind of like the only one that knows kind of what we go through. So if that's what you're looking for, I get back with chief of staff and administration, and we can come up with a panel to address that. But I personally don't think we should go external.
If I may.
Surely,
Thank you.
Councilman Vieira.
And that wasn't actually what I was looking for. Like y'all's internal policies, that's not limited to that. It could be limited to, it could be dealing with the way employees deal with the public, et cetera, parks and recreation, benefits, just overarching deals with mental health. It not limited just to police and fire. But again, what I was looking for was the administration's position on that. So if y'all are opposed to that and give me a good reason as to why it's not a good idea, then maybe I'll be like, hey, you guys got a great point. So that's all. So I don't even need an answer today.
And I was gonna say, actually, the policy that we have now, the procedures that we have works, you know, for our firefighters and police officers, our first responders.
Sure.
Now, I can't speak for the ATU because I don't know exactly what they have, but that's part of the city policy, you know, for any city employee to follow through that program that they have. And you kind of specify for public safety, so that's why fire and police put their additional assistance that we put in.
Sure, and maybe I wasn't, again, I don't recall what actually, I do believe I recall what I motioned for, and I think it was for an overarching policy of the city of Tampa, not just police and fire. So that's why I spoke to John Bennett about it yesterday, because I think there was maybe some miscommunication on that. So again, all I'm looking for to see is the administration's position on it, and if there is a reason to not do it, then I'll be glad to withdraw it. So again, I mean, I think that publicly discussing it at this time kind of defeats the purpose of going internally, et cetera. So that's what I was looking for. So I think that, so like I said, the memo is not least related to what I was looking for, if that makes sense.
Okay. So you're
Thank
looking for an
Councilman
overall
Goode.
city policy?
Yes.
Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily recognize it, but I would just say
You were
that,
going to have questions for the chief on agenda item 10, and I believe that's what Councilman Vieira was talking about.
I just know the history, and I think the chief knows where I'm going with that. You know, you're gonna have a hard time, Mr. Vieira, convincing the union when you talk. I can't speak for city employees, but I can tell you talk about police and fire, an outside panel talking about their health conditions and mental health. I'm just saying I don't see that happening, and I don't want to get on camera saying why, but I know why that would be a problem
It'll be a shutdown.
quickly.
Sure.
So just what I know you're trying to advocate that there's things in place and there are things in place for if someone's having a problem or they see there's a distress, but when you say you have outside source come in to evaluate public safety officials, it's
And
a
I
little
guess
bit different.
one of the things, if we had a problem, we can address it, but I don't see that we have a problem with the program that we have or with the assistance that we have.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you. And again, we're having a discussion publicly on something that should probably be held privately. I'm not asking for people to be evaluated. I don't, what I'm looking at is things like, perfect example, we have the mental health professionals who work for Tampa Police Department, right? Can we better fund that? That's just one. It's not about doing analysis of employees or anything of that. It's about policies. That's it. And so that's why I would request, Mr. Chair, if I may, that I can make a motion at the end to put this
Why
to
don't you
another
do that
time,
at
because
the
I
end?
think this is,
Why don't you do
Well,
that
I
at the
guess
end?
one of my questions too, is there a problem? Is the system broken?
but like I said, Chief, let's have this privately. I spoke to Chief Bennett about this. I'll speak to him during the meeting about this as well, but this
Okay.
is for a private conversation.
Okay.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to go ahead and proceed with agenda items number 8 and 9, Chief?
I believe agenda item number 8 refer to the money, the funding
Okay.
for New Tampa.
May I? Or
Yes.
unless if you wish to speak first?
I sent a memo
Councilman
in.
Yes.
Vieira, were you satisfied with that
Well,
memorandum?
yeah, some things, I do want to bring this thing back because there are some requests for more time, and I have no problem with that, but I want to make sure that we get a specific time on that, which I'm sure you're fine with. When you deal with the issue of New Tampa 33647, as you know, the issue is not number of calls, it's potential response times, particularly with K-Bar Ranch area. So in the memo, Tampa Fire Rescue says that they need more time. I'm totally fine with that. But I just want to make sure that we have a time when that answer is going to come back to us. So I'll make a motion for that if I may. For North Tampa, and I know in speaking to you, you're potentially looking at Fowler area, potentially for a new station, and you're looking at real estate out there, et cetera. And again, you need more time on that. I have no problem with that at all. You know, my main issue is that we had $1 million in the budget for District 7 for Tampa Fire Rescue, right? And I want to make sure that we know how that money is going to be spent, because there are real acute needs in District 7 whenever it comes to Tampa Fire Rescue. And I want to make sure that we keep on that. So I'm going to motion for this to come back to us on December 15th. And again, if you need more time, ask, and I'm fine with that.
Okay, can I comment on both of them? Okay.
Chair.
So as far as, first of all, thank you all for your support with Tampa Fire Rescue and for getting the need out there of helping the community and for the men and women that are responding to the calls. So when I look at the money for District 7, those monies, as I stated before, is going to be used to put additional resources up there to assist. When I reviewed, it's all about the data. We have the information, and you're right, it's not the response call, the number of calls, it's the response time. So when I broke down those calls, a lot of that deals with non-emergency calls, and as I explained, the A, B, and CD calls. So with that, I am looking to see if we can partner with the non-emergency units to see if they can have someone to stage up there to help with that call response time, as well as doing additional resources for Tampa Fire Rescue in that area. So we're talking about two different boxes, box 262 and 263, which is in K-Bar. We know it's one way in, one way out. I'm also working with mobility in the county to see about getting an access road off of Morris Bridge. Now with that, you know, once again, been in this position for 16 months, helping out the North Tampa area, we finally got Station 25, and that leads into the next agenda items about Station 24 and 25. So it took us a year to get that station up and running, which has helped out the North Tampa area. The call volume has equalized among the units up there, which shows also the unit hour utilization for each individual has decreased, which that's what we're looking for. And I'm looking to do that throughout the city of Tampa, but once again, it took a year for that, so it's gonna take time to continue, you know, moving along. Now with that, we talk about personnel. I have hired over 100 people in the last year. I do multiple hiring groups to get our stats up and our numbers up to help accommodate, you know, what we need for the community. So that is my goal. Now, when you say time, I've worked with the real estate department. We have looked at, they have done over probably about 25 plus sites that we have had no good luck on as far as purchasing, you know, and that has also been a concern and an issue too. We talk about the value of it and we talk about the location. We just can't put it anywhere, and that's what I'm not gonna do, is just do a knee-jerk reaction and put it somewhere where it's not needed. So I'm strategically looking to find the perfect spot to put this to help the North Tampa area, as well as assist the community throughout the city of Tampa, not just North Tampa. I'm doing the same thing for South Tampa, East Tampa, and downtown Tampa as well.
May I, sir?
Councilman
Thank
Vieira.
you. And obviously not looking for a knee-jerk reaction. What I was looking for was the $1 million that were specifically dedicated to District 7.
Yes, sir.
When you speak about all of the city of Tampa, we proposed a couple of years ago a public safety master plan for all of the city of Tampa whenever it comes for police as well as fire. That includes south of Gandy, that includes Sulphur Springs, East Tampa, South Tampa, North Tampa, New Tampa, et cetera, et cetera. So this, I don't want this to make it seem as if I'm just looking out for District 7. I'm looking at the $1 million that we passed in the budget and to see how that's going to go to address the deficits that we have in District 7. Very simple. So I don't want my motion to be misconstrued.
So with that, I am also putting a heavy rescue unit up in the 3347 because the need for to respond to the interstate as well as areas up there. I am looking, we actually have a heavy rescue on order that's going to assist with the fundings of that $1 million, as well as putting additional personnel to offset that unit, as well as additional resources, whether it be non-transport or transport up in the 33647 area.
Great. Okay, well, I'll motion for that to come back. If I may, I can do it at the end of the meeting right now, sir, whenever everyone's done, if anybody wants to speak.
Councilman Goode.
Well, Chief, thank you for your efforts. We started this journey back in 2019 with Little Station 10. A lot of work needs to be done on that one as well, but, we were able to get some things moving over there. So I'm grateful that we did get a Public Safety Service supposed to come back and talk about the different areas and the relief up there with the new station, with the remodel station that helps Sulphur Springs, and me and Mr. Vieira share some of that boundary there. So we appreciate the work you've been doing, and I tell you, you hit the ground running from day one, and you haven't looked back. So I'm very proud to say that, to call you the fire chief, because you've done a heck of a job. I want to make sure we're still on with you and the union tomorrow at 10. I didn't see it on my calendar, but I have it written down somewhere. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Talk about those other issues that we want
Yes,
to talk
sir.
about. Okay, well, thank you so much for what you do, and I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10.
Okay, thank you.
You finished?
Yes, sir, I'm good.
Thank you very much. All right, then I guess we are now going to talk about agenda item number 9.
It's,
Councilman Vieira, it's all
it's all,
taken
no,
care
it's
of?
all the same, yeah. I'll make
Yeah,
it-
it's combined, this with
Okay.
Station 24 and Station 25, so like I said, that was a great move for
Thank
Station
you
24.
very, very much, Chief. Anything else you want to add?
No, sir.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
good day.
Agenda item number 13. File number CM 22-77271.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, this was my motion, and just to set it up, city attorney has sent us a memo, and at the end of the memo, it says that on page 4, conclusion and recommendations, that should city council, I'm gonna paraphrase, want to regulate settlement decisions, the recommendation from the legal department is to limit only the ones above $100,000 and the ones that have to do with city council. So unless you all want to go through that whole presentation here, I would say I would like to make a motion to ask the city attorney to develop an ordinance to delegate city council's authorities as defined in Charter Section 7.02 and 8.01 to sign contracts for lawsuit settlements under $100,000 and to make payment for those settlements under $100,000 without appearing before city council for approval. Lawsuits against city council or city council members would not be included in this exemption. The ordinance would be renewed every 5 years to be presented for first reading consideration on December 15th.
Second.
I'm going to say, I haven't even heard the presentation from Ms. Zellman. I will say this, we have a motion on the floor from Councilman Carlson, seconded from Councilwoman Hurtak. My discussion is gonna be, I'd like to hear from staff.
And if I may, in order to respond to that motion, can I get a copy of it? Because it was hard to follow. If you have a copy in writing.
I don't have a copy here, but I can make one.
Okay.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I mean, I also read the report, and I think you're just making a motion off of what the recommendations from the report were, correct?
Yeah, and the report was sent to us
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago, so I was just
Yeah,
trying to save time. If you want to hear what the presentation, fine. I tried to get a charter amendment related to this, and the recommendation was to do it by ordinance and to specifically exclude, as the document says here, exclude items under 100,000 and any related city council, so I'm just following those guidelines in pushing an ordinance.
Ms. Zellman,
What is the wish of council? Do you want me to go through the memo, or do you want me to respond to that motion, or do you want me just to take the motion and then we'll bring you back something in response to the motion? I know we're short on time
This is a
today.
staff report. Councilman Carlson said he's happy with it, but I haven't, I've looked at it, but I haven't heard staff's side of it, and we have a viewing audience and people that are here in chambers that may not have seen the memo.
Yeah. Okay, and just to be clear, I mean, I
That's transparency, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And it's not a question of sides versus sides. The question was understanding the city attorney's role with regard to the approval of settlements. And as I explained in the memo, under the charter, the city attorney has management and control of all legal matters of the city. Legal matters include the settlement of lawsuits, which typically occurs in the majority of civil cases. I went on to explain that we have at any given time hundreds of cases. The vast majority of them are personal injury lawsuits arising from motor vehicle accidents or trip and fall on city property. And I went on to explain that when Gina Grimes took over as city attorney in 2019, she established what I think is a very good process whereby we have a settlement committee made up of the city attorney, a deputy city attorney, representatives of risk management, and then the assistant city attorneys that are actually the trial attorneys in these cases. And we review proposed settlements at great length once a month. And typically, the timing of those reviews are driven by the attorney has an upcoming mediation, so they need authority to have some dollar amount to propose at mediation, or there's a hearing upcoming, or worst case scenario, there's a trial coming up. And at those settlement conferences, we go through all sorts of details, you know, the plaintiff's age, their marital status, their earning capacity before and after the incident, the credibility of the witnesses, you know, all sorts of things that factor into the decision as to how much any particular lawsuit should be settled for, and then ultimately reach a determination and have that settlement authority. Now, just to cut to the quick, because I understand that what Mr. Carlson is asking for is for city and council to be involved in approving settlements. So what I had suggested was actually one of two things, although it sounds like maybe he's combining them both, and that is either just bringing to city council for settlement approval those lawsuits that involve an action that council took. An example would be several years ago, council passed an anti-conversion ordinance. It was found to be anti-conversion therapy ordinance. It was found to be unconstitutional. We now have a demand for attorney's fees for which the city is liable. The demand is for $2 million. We're still negotiating that settlement, but when we do reach a settlement amount, it's going to be probably pretty significant. So something like that we would bring back to council. And one little piece I left out of this is for council to discuss settlements, we have to have what's called a shade meeting under Florida statutes, and that's an exemption to the government in the sunshine law, where we have to notice the meeting, but then we have it in private with just your attorneys present. We have to have a certified court reporter present. We discuss the settlement, we reach agreement. Once the case is concluded, that meeting, the transcripts of that meeting become public record. So just to be clear, that would be the manner in which settlements would be discussed at city council, unless you were simply to approve a settlement on consent agenda. Now, but again, if you pull it off consent, then that triggers the shade meeting. So again, my two proposals were just bring you the settlements that pertain to city business, city council business, I'm sorry. So again, an ordinance that you pass, an action that you took. The land use things tend to come back to you anyway, because typically people invoke the FLUDRA process, or if they file a petition for writ of certiorari. In any event, they typically come back to you with a new proposed rezoning plan or whatever, which you then have to approve at a public meeting anyway. And then the other category I think I referred to was maybe, and I can't think of a particular example, but something in my gut tells me this may happen someday, that there's a lawsuit where maybe future similar actions could be prevented if city council were to act legislatively, so it would make sense to bring that kind of settlement to you. And then my option two in the, thank you, in the memo was, again, just go with the dollar threshold. And there currently is an ordinance on the books that has a $25,000 or more threshold. My proposal would be to increase that to $100,000. That's consistent with two things. One, looking to the east, that's the threshold of matters that go to the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissioners. Anything below that they can settle without board approval. And that's also the threshold that council has set for approval of contracts. Contracts of 100,000 and above have to come to council. Contracts below that don't necessarily have to. So again, it sounds as if what Councilman Carlson is proposing is sort of a combination of both of those. We could write an ordinance that way, whatever's the pleasure of council.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Back in my day, I remember on the consent agenda, we would have, I know, not that long ago, but we would have lawsuit settlements that we would have to approve. I remember one was like $60,000, and there was no discussion on it. It was just on the consent agenda, but then that disappeared. I haven't, not that I recall lately in the last few years, maybe 3 or 4 years, that has appeared anymore. Was that an executive decision or from a past
So back
city attorney?
and I attached this to the memo, back in, I believe it was 2018, Sal Torito had written a legal opinion, August 16th of 2018, a legal opinion interpreting 5.01 to provide that settlement of lawsuits did not need to be approved by council, and therefore, that was when they stopped bringing them.
Okay, and then one last question, and this is to Councilmember Carlson's motion. It says to delegate city council's authorities as defined in the charter, and it cites the sections, to sign contracts for lawsuit settlements under 100,000, meaning the chairperson would sign those, correct? Just like we do on anything that goes through the consent agenda.
So I would want to flesh out this language a little bit. It's very rare that we have a signed settlement agreement. Typically, when cases settle, the plaintiff will sign a release and the city will pay. So it really isn't about signing contracts or signing settlement agreements. It's basically just authorizing the city to move forward with a settlement in a particular dollar amount.
Okay, so then it would, going back to sign contracts for settlements under 100 and to make payment for those settlements under 100,000 without appearing before city council for approval. I don't understand that. It doesn't come to us, but we sign it. So how do we vote on it?
Well, again, you wouldn't be signing.
Okay.
You wouldn't be signing anything, the mayor wouldn't be signing anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Councilman Goode.
I'm really confused. We sat here for hours on end on Tuesday about this issue. There was hardly any questions, but today we have a bunch of questions. Ms. Elvin talked about when you need to go into a closed session. I made mention about that. I made mention about a lot of these things. I made mention that lawsuits, per the ordinance or charter, what I read, that they should be coming to city council from HR so we can know how many lawsuits have been settled. I've never seen anything like that. I thought there was a list supposed to come with if they're doing settlements.
If I may, City Council Attorney Shelby made me aware yesterday that in 2006, the county approved an the city council approved an ordinance requiring HR settlements between $10,000 and $25,000 to be reported to council on a quarterly basis. Apparently, the reason none of us knew about that was that MuniCode never published that part of the ordinance. So, to my knowledge, it's never been followed. I would strongly encourage, whatever result comes from today, we're gonna have to amend that part of the code anyway. I would strongly encourage council to remove that part of the 2006 ordinance, and I'll tell you why. There's plaintiffs' attorneys that keep databases of what different jurisdictions will pay for a nuisance settlement. You know, if you get a trip and fall in Hillsborough County, I can take your case and I can get you $5,000 without having to do anything. You know, things like that. That was obviously a hypothetical example. But the last thing we want to do is advertise to the plaintiff's bar what we're settling. If I tell you how many cases we get all the time, and the cases I'm talking about are where they actually file suit, there's that much and more that go to risk management that are settled before a suit's even filed. So to publish, to make public in an easily obtainable database all those claims is not at all in the city's interest.
And thank you for the explanation, but what bothers me is that time and time again, we find that things that are supposed to be immunity or things that are supposed to have been done. I can recall back when you talked about the audit, that never was done, but it was voted on and passed, but it hadn't been inputted. I mean, these are these small things that are happening, and when we have an issue with this council, it's like we're the bad person. No, we're not the bad person. This is what was put into play, but no one's following the rules.
Well, again, in that case.
Let me finish, Ms. Elman.
Okay.
Our job is to make sure to protect this house of the city and make sure the rules are followed. And then sometimes people don't like when we be big brother and say, hey, you're not following the rules. Now we're the bad people. That's the problem I have with the way this government is running here. We bring up things that people know that are wrong, but we continue to show a blind eye to them. And it will continue to be bad when that issue may come up. May not come up 2 more 3 years. But eventually it may come up again. But yet we didn't fix it the last time. This is the problem I have, that to me, sometimes we're not doing our job that the public entrusts us to do. They entrust us to fix the issues when they come before us. And there are issues that we have not fixed. And now today I see this item here that we could have dealt with on Tuesday. We could have dealt with it. The bottom line, settlements need to come to this council so we can know what everyone's doing.
Well, if I may, on Tuesday you were discussing charter changes. This doesn't require a charter change.
It may not
This
require a charter
requires-
change, but I'm saying we could have dealt with this still on Tuesday.
Let's just deal with it now.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, what happened on Tuesday is that folks said, well, it's just make it an ordinance instead. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to follow the guidelines that were in this document. The issue, which I described the other day, is that there is this 2018 memo from Sal Torito as city attorney, 2 paragraphs that changed the charter. Some of the reviews, some of the media coverage the other day said we were trying to expand the powers of city council. No, this is a case where in 2018, a city attorney in 2 paragraphs took away the powers of city council. And so if you look, you're going to get a copy of it in a second, but I had Ms. Shelby do some research, and there's plenty of examples of this, but in 2006, there's an ordinance that was passed that Ms. Zellman just referred to that gives the city attorney powers below $25,000. If in 2006, and Pam Iorio signed it, if in 2006, the city council delegated its authority below $25,000, and no charter amendments were made between 2006 and 2018 in that regard, why did the city attorney suddenly make an opinion that's adverse to an ordinance that the mayor at the time in 2006 signed and was okay with? Something else was going on. And so what I want to do, and I can read this again, I think you all have copies of it. What I want to do, based on what you all said the other day, is pass an ordinance following Ms. Zellman's guidelines. But the key word here, I don't care if you all follow her advice and make it $100,000. I pulled that from her. If you want to make it $1 million, that's fine with me. The number one word that I want in here is delegate. And that is to protect the powers of city council that were taken away by this 2018 memo. We cannot allow powers to be taken away. We're not asking for any new powers, but the point is that if the city attorney is going to sign contracts and pay payments, you look in the charter 7.02 and 8.01, we have those powers. I can read this document. Nowhere under the power in 5.01, nowhere in the powers of the city attorney does it say that the city attorney has the right to sign contracts or pay payments. It says the city attorney can negotiate, but negotiate does not mean sign contracts and pay. Just like the mayor's office can negotiate a lease, but we have to approve the lease. The mayor's office can negotiate a sale of a building, but we have to approve the contract and the payment of it. If the city attorney needs flexibility on HR issues or whatever, we can add that in here, but we must have an ordinance that supersedes this letter from 2018 that clearly shows that it's our power and we're delegating it to the city attorney. Thank you.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm glad to support this, and that's what I said on Tuesday, which is I don't want this to be in the charter if we can look at it reasonably by virtue of ordinance. And I'll repeat what I said on Tuesday, which is that a lot of settlements, to have a policy that brings all City of Tampa settlements before City Council, what put at risk are legal claims and would subject the city to more lawsuits. Plaintiffs' attorneys, I've never been one. I've been an attorney for 19 years, always done defense work. God bless the plaintiffs' bar. But they have sites that talk about what you can get from different insurance companies, from different corporate entities, from different governmental bodies, et cetera. And if we start to publish that information through city council settlements, subject to city council questioning, it will be a giant kick me sign on the behind of the city of Tampa for the plaintiffs' bar. That's a fact. That's a fact. Then whenever you deal with settlements, you're also dealing with things that are personal. The impression that a plaintiff makes, the impression that a defendant driver makes, or a City of Tampa employee, something that maybe somebody knows about something in the case that is not public yet, that we don't want to have public, but that forms the basis or the rationale for a settlement.
Yes, sir.
Diving so deep
Yes,
into those
sir.
issues, you know, and again, this ordinance proposed by Councilman Carlson, 100% for it, because it's reasonable and it picks those cases that are larger or the ones that originate from our actions. I'm 100% fine with that, but it saves the city, again, from having that giant kick me sign on their behind for Morgan and Morgan. And God bless Morgan and Morgan, have a lot of cases with them. Thank you.
Councilmember Maniscalco.
Thank you very much. You know, we have a different city attorney. It's not 2018 anymore. I disagree with the opinion of 2018, and I think this is the right thing to do for the sake of transparency. Again, I mentioned when I first got here, we would see these settlements, 60,000, 50,000, smaller amounts, but they would come to city council and the public had an opportunity to see them. I never remember any type of discussion. However, it was in plain view. Somebody could pull the agenda and say, oh, they're settling for whatever, and they knew about it instead of not being visible as it used to be before. So I disagree with the opinion of the former city attorney. I think this is wise and in the name of transparency, and it just takes us back to how things used to be when it was more transparent early on when I got elected, and I don't see anything wrong with this, so I'm happy to support it.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
I'm sorry, I believe Mr. Goods was before me. I was blocking, I'm sorry.
I recognize, sir.
Councilman Good.
Thank you, sir. You know, I reflect back on Tuesday. A charter versus an ordinance, like a shell game. This is no different if we're gonna go ahead, and it sounds like we're gonna be able to move something forward today with Mr. Carlson's ordinance, a proposed ordinance. To me, it's no different than 6.03 when we talk about appointments versus the charter versus an ordinance. So I'm going to be looking at that in the near future to bring the appointment situation back as an ordinance, Mr. Shelby, and I need you to give me for the language of that, because I will be making a motion it relates to bringing that back. Because if we're going to play the shell game of we don't want to touch the charter, the Constitution versus an ordinance situation to change things, then I'll play the game. But to me, it's a shell game that I see that's going on here. But I will support, because city council authority shouldn't be taken away. We should be able to delegate.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Would this new ordinance that's being proposed supersede this 2006 100?
Yeah, so
Okay.
the concept would be to amend that part of the code.
Okay.
Which currently sets the limits at 25,000, and then again talks about the reports on things
Yeah.
between 10 and 25.
Yeah, so that's what
The
I'm.
concept would be to amend that.
Okay, good. So I'm just looking at like the cleanup of this.
Yes.
So that would clean that up. Excellent. Thank you. That's my only question.
Any more conversation?
I have no problem with one that signed by Pam earlier, April 2006, changing it from 10 to 25.
All right. To clarify, we
And
still have
if-
a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if I may, I'm reading Mr. Carlson's motion, and again, my proposal would be to amend chapter 2, the way we just talked about. Some of the language in here, I'm not sure is relevant, so it would be, but we can discuss that when we bring back a proposed ordinance, never mind. Well,
And
I
I'm,
understand the direction.
And I'm happy to work with you also. In terms of superseding, I know usually ordinances supersede all previous ordinances, but do we also need to put in there specifically that it would supersede this 2018 opinion?
I think I'm gonna need to provide you with something, basically revising and restating the 2018 memo. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
And I'll figure out how to do that.
Thank you.
Again, just to clarify, we have a motion on the floor that has been made by Councilman Carlson, that was seconded by Councilwoman Hurt Taft. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Maniscalco, item agenda 14, that was your motion.
No, Goods, Maniscalco.
Oh, Goods Maniscalco, thank you. File number CM 22-74625.
Good afternoon. Long time no see. Item number 14 is, you asked staff to look at ways that we could come up with ways that we can help with the probate, have residents with probate process. And Councilman Guzzi and I had some conversation on your briefing earlier this week. And so I maintain that the probate process is a private legal matter that the city cannot interfere with. We are working with, I met with, well, let me back up. Attorney Johns, Abby Feely, and myself met with Ms. Keela McCaskill that had some ideas on what we could do with probate process. A lot of it is being proactive and making sure that the citizens and residents know what their options are with property before it actually enters into the probate, the importance of estate planning. So as a part of our tenant services team, we are working with Ms. McCaskill to put on a workshop in second quarter of 2023. We've put out some dates, hoping to have it at the Tampa Convention Center, and we have a draft agenda for what that day may look like. All of that is really premised around being proactive, educating citizens on the difference between, the differences in estate planning, the difference between a will, a trust, and how do we handle real estate. The conversation that we had on the briefing this week, we talked about clouded title or keeping properties in circulation, particularly in housing. And one of the things that I shared with you is that Deputy Administrator Lee Stromgo is working on setting up a CLT. He'll have a presentation on that soon. But if there has to be a public purpose, the city should not, and I would recommend strongly against it, entering into private legal matters to figure out private issues regarding real property. However, if we were in a position where we wanted to a clean title, get that property and be able to put it in a CLT to protect it for affordability at a later time, those are things that we can do. So there's a fine line that we have to walk regarding a public purpose and not paying for private services for private benefit.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Yes.
I believe everything that you're telling me. I still contend that we can have some type of pilot program where we can have some dollars with some criteria for those individuals who are indigent, who are having issues that can't even get to court, who don't understand a process. You look at some of these houses that have become dilapidated or have squatters in there, incurring code fines and things like that.
So
That's what I'm kind of looking how we can kind of navigate some of that.
Right, and so for me, okay, so when you're talking like that, it puts me in the real estate mind, right? When you're talking about squatters and blighted property, in the CRA world, you purchase properties for strategic acquisition. And if I was trying to purchase a property that's encumbered with multiple heirs and the title is kind of clouded, you have to figure that stuff out. There's a role for the CRA to play that we could probably outsource with an attorney to kind of work through that. Those things take a really long time. You have to look for people to hunt down records. But the public purpose in that is to eliminate the blight
and it is a strategic acquisition. And what I'm saying to do that is we should not be clearing the title so that the heirs can then do whatever with the property. Our public purpose would be to clean up that blight, clear the title so that the city can purchase the property free and clear, perhaps put it into a CLT. It's multi-transactional, it's not something that's quick.
And I'm on the same line, and I'm good with that.
Okay.
But we got a process to get them there. That's all I'm saying. And I believe with a process to get them there, strategically, those who don't know to know, we can help them know. That's what I want to be able to do. I think we have a meeting coming up with a gentleman that the city was in contract with in reference to those type of issues, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully, during that meeting, we can clear up a lot of that as well, because my understanding somebody is under contract as reference to dealing with some of these houses or properties that have so many liens on them. So I think that all kind of intertwines in that a little bit as well. So I'm hoping during that discussion we'll get a little bit more information, but whatever you can come up with, Ms. Travis, I know you got a lot on your plate. I know you do.
I'm good.
And it may be down the
relaxed
road,
now.
but at
You
least
understand?
folks know, or we can tell people something's coming. And I know everything sometimes takes a moment, and you guys are under a lot of pressure because of this crisis. But when I hear things and see other places doing things, I can't negate my duties by bringing these things to the forefront and to you to see what can we do, not what we can't do. So I appreciate what you've done so far. Looking forward to the next meeting, and hopefully we can finally get something moving for our citizens who are in need.
Okay, so the only thing again, I like to set expectations. Redevelopment is a long process. Those are not things that are quick. But as we ramp up, like you have charged us with the CRA to start looking at strategic acquisitions, we will start looking at that. You look at problem properties, and we'll begin doing that. But again, what's coming before you soon is the community land trust, and there are some decisions that you're gonna have to make with that. And these are opportunities when we get properties like that to keep them in circulation, and also control the affordability piece for generations to come, or for a longer period of time. The CLT is the way to purchase property, capture it, and keep it in there.
So me going to Chicago wasn't in